Hi, my name is Wanda Johnson. I'm the mother of Oscar Grant, who was killed January 1st, 2009 at the Fruitvale BART station in Oakland, California. He was killed by Johannes Meserly, and the instigator of him being killed was Tony Peroni.
And I talked to you right as this new year was beginning, and you were full of hope about perhaps Officer Peroni being held accountable. In addition to that piece, you were full of hope about many things, like you're on a health mission and you have many things going in your life. But I know, at least in that regard of the case, you had a little bit of a setback. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we actually, in October, we held a press conference reminding the district attorney of what she had originally said, Nancy O'Malley, that after the case, they were going to pursue and bring criminal charges against Officer Tony Peroni at that time. And we reminded her of that. And after the trial, she said they didn't have funds enough to go ahead and try to charge him at that time. And so when we reminded her in October, she came back and said that she was going to open up the case and have a team of investigators look into it, and which she did do that. We went back and had a meeting with her results and findings of that. And during that time, she provided us with a set of documents of what they had found. And actually, if you give me a second, I want to get those documents so I can read a little bit of it. Okay.
Sure. And when you go away, Wanda, just tell me when that meeting was.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
Okay.
It was on the 11th.
11th of January.
Of January, yes.
That's here. Okay, we're going to wait for you.
Okay. Okay, sorry. So she actually wrote this on January 7th, and we met with her on the 11th, that Monday. And in her briefing and her reasoning, she lists several reasons about what happened and why she could not charge the officer. And so I want to talk about that for just a minute, of why she said she didn't charge the officer. She said she couldn't charge him because it would not be right to charge him with felony murder. And so she didn't charge him with felony murder, but one of her conclusions she says, the law makes clear that Anthony Peroni can be guilty of murder only if he personally killed Mr. Grant, which we know that that was not true, because many times people are found guilty of murder and they were just there at the scene. And so we know that that part of her statement was not true. So then she went and said, in fact, neither Peroni killed nor aided and abetted Meserly, who actually killed Mr. Grant. Well, in a sense, he did aid and abet, and the reason why is because he actually initiated the whole scene. Instead of him being the officer who was first on site, the one who supposed to be in command at that time, he failed to do that. And Oscar ended up losing his life. And so from this meeting, she cited several reasons and several cases of why she could not charge him. And so in the meeting, we posed her and to not make such a decision, but to go back and look at the evidence and think about it before she made a decision. But one of the things that we did not know is that after coming out of the meeting, that she had already had her press conference and she had already provided them with these documents. And so from that, we have a team of attorneys who actually have been looking into the case as well. And so they had asked her to hold off to before she made any decision, but she had already put this out. And so what she did a couple days after is contact one of those attorneys. And so she wants to meet with us again on the 18th to talk about this. Not to talk about what she wrote up, but to talk about any additional findings that she may have. So our thing is we're hoping that she would change her decision and charge file charges against the officer.
So that puts you in a really tough position because now she's publicly stated this and it's been on all the media outlets, right? Like Officer Peroni will not be charged. And so what do you make of that? I mean, of course, we can't read her mind, but why do you imagine that she kind of put the cart in front of the horse and made this mass announcement prior to your knowledge of it even?
Well, I think part of her thing was that this was a political stunt for her anyway. Um, this would, make her be able to probably, she thought, go to the next position or attorney general or somewhere to that effect, a new position. And having, since she's going to open up the case, uh, makes it look good for her resume. And so what doesn't make it look good is that she put this fact finding out, this report on BART, Officer Peroni, and did not wait until she met with the family. And then now she may have to recant after we meet on the 18th, which would be great because he should be charged. And he should be charged absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about this, so I mean, we could think of any number of cases, right? We think of the most recent one because I interviewed the two of you together, Pastor Kenneth Glasgow in Alabama, who was simply present transporting somebody who happened to have killed somebody, and he has a risk of being charged. We saw the
Mm-hmm.
officers in the Floyd case being charged for being bystanders. So that rationale doesn't completely make sense. Do you have any thoughts about that piece of it?
Yeah, so I think that it's important that we as community members, Oscar being my son, but that we really follow these cases because oftentimes those officers, they're not held accountable. I think even today, the shooting of Willie McCoy, I believe his name's in Vallejo, um, those officers were not found guilty. And so we have that scenario over and over and over again. And so we really have to say to ourselves, you know, is the district attorney's office in combination with the police force really serving the public, the people, the way that they need to be served? And so, I look at that because, very few officers have been charged, and that's just not in California, but that's all over the country, for their actions of killing people. And if you really study and you look, America is one of the uh, countries that kill civilians the most by policing. And so we really have to work to change that, as a community, by us all getting involved and working to change some of these laws that we have in place.
Okay, yes. And so this meeting is on January 18th. Um, it's significant for many reasons. Namely, it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I also will just mention it's the birthday of my late father. But what does it mean that how significant could this be that this meeting is happening for you about potentially some justice in the case that relates to your son on Martin Luther King Jr. Day? What is significant about this for you?
Oh man, it's so significant because, number one, African American people have been fighting for many, many years to be treated equally. And we know that our liberty is imbalanced. We know that we just saw what happened in Washington, D.C., and how a building that's secure with police and security guards, how people was able to just break windows, get right through, go into our Democrats and Republicans' office and throw files all over the floor. And yet there was really no shootings. We've seen the officers have a great amount of self-control and not do anything. And those people climbed the walls and broke windows and just took podiums and did other things. And yet we have many African American men by themselves running away from the police, and yet they end up losing their lives. And so um, it's significant because Martin Luther King fought for so many years, trying to get our people to be treated equally. He spoke of having that dream that one day, Black children and white children will hold hands. And yes, that is a reality right now, but we're still fighting for equal rights, equal opportunity, and to be treated equally in our judicial system.
So what are you, let's talk through both possible scenarios. Like, what time is your meeting happening on the 18th, first of all, the logistics?
So we're having it at 11 in the morning.
Okay. And by we, who's being called into this meeting?
So I have a team of people that's the Oscar Grant Coalition. So it's several of us will be going in. I think this time it'll just be the attorneys, myself, and another family member.
Okay. So let's talk about the two scenarios. Let's say that you get good news. Maybe she can't charge on that particular murder charge, but let's say it's even second degree or third degree murder, some level of accountability. How will you feel after that meeting if that's the outcome? And then we'll talk about the other scenario as well.
If that's the outcome, I would feel very good. I would feel that she is doing what she knows should have been done a long time ago and holding him accountable for his actions. I would feel a measure of justice. The justice would be for me to have my son here, but for the other officer to be charged would be another measure of justice that I definitely believe that my family and I should have.
Yes, I agree. And in the other case, in the worst case scenario, or the other scenario which might be, let's just say that she was calling you in to explain further why she made this decision and deliver some news that would be less positive. How will you receive that, and then how will you move forward in either scenario?
So if she says that, we're going to have this case tried by the public, meaning that we're still going to put the pressure on. We're still going to have protests go forward. We will still have press conferences. We will still have people in the public trying this case. I can't think of the word right now. A tribunal, basically, is what it's called. We will work to have some tribunals set up because he should be charged for his actions. There was nothing that he done from the time he stepped on that platform till he got off of that platform, even in the stand, even in the chair of testifying, there was nothing that he done that was right. If you read this brochure, if you read this, her findings in it, it talks about how, let me find one of the things.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I'd love to hear.
Let me see. Where is it? Peroni's knee was in the mid, back, upper shoulder, and neck area of Grant. Peroni was in the process of standing up, changing sides, and had his knee again in Oscar's back. It has, let me go to some other stuff because I want to find some of the other stuff. There's so many different things in here. I should have highlighted the ones that I
That's
wanted to
okay.
read
Take your
for
time.
today.
No rush.
Peroni's conduct on the night in question was offensive and unacceptable. He may very well have violated BART police policy during the initial investigation and now upon reinvestigation. The office deploys his behavior in the strongest possible terms. Administrative, disciplinary, and civil sanctions imposed against him were entirely justified. But really, they didn't impose any sanctions against him. He was terminated from BART because of fraud. It had nothing to do with what he did to Oscar. It had nothing to do with him using racial epithets. It had nothing to do with him hitting Oscar. It had nothing to do with him pushing Oscar's head against the concrete. It had nothing to do with him having his knee upon Oscar's neck and Oscar telling him he couldn't breathe. It had nothing to do with him hitting Oscar. And so there was no sanctions brought against him concerning what he did to Oscar. And so she tried to justify why she couldn't file charges against him, when in reality, she could have filed charges against him, and charges should have been filed against him when it first happened, which we tried to get her to do. But they wanted to try to use him as a witness, and he didn't even be the witness they wanted because they ended up having to have him as a hostile witness.
Right. Yeah. And so, and I feel like you gave some really great context about all of that in the last interview. The part that I think is puzzling for me is kind of like how she can recover, like, because the world thinks case is closed, that's it. And so that's the part that I'm really curious about. Like, I wonder what prompted her to massively, announce that so early. Do you have a speculation about that part?
I think that she didn't think that she was going to maybe get pressure, because we asked her to rethink her position during the meeting that we had with her. And so she had already, I believe, given that information to the media. And when we asked her to rethink her position, she decided to rethink it. She said she would at that meeting. And then she ended up calling one of our attorneys or one of our representatives and wanted to meet with us again. And so that's fine. We will meet with her, but we're not going to stop the public pressure because he deserves to be charged, and she uh, is elected and put in office to do her job. And when someone doesn't do their job, right, they're usually taken out of office. Um, and so we expect her to do her job, and her job is to charge him, And if she failed to do what she said, then she has to be held accountable.
Yes. Um, Very powerful statement. So I will let you go pretty soon here. So just so you'll meet with her 2 days before a new president will be inaugurated in our country. The old one might or might not. I mean, he's been impeached a second time. Um, so I guess I have to ask you again, like, how hopeful are you about the future of like racial justice and these issues that you've been working so hard on in terms of police accountability?
Well,
Now,
I'm I'm optimistic. I'm going to continue to fight as long as I have breath, and help others with their cases, and give them pointers of what they could do to magnify them, to work to get justice, as well. So it's become a job for me. It's become a passion. It's become a lifelong journey for me to encourage other mothers and fathers to help them along the process of losing their loved ones unnecessarily by those who've been hired to protect and serve us.
thank you, Wanda. Anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
No, I just wanted to say, and people may think, oh, she's anti-police, or, hates all police, which is absolutely not true. But I will say this is that those police that are bad on the force, they need to be off the force. And until other officers start speaking up, you will have community members, such as myself, coming against those bad apples on the force and demanding that they be removed from the force. And the ones that are doing a good job continue to do those good jobs and speak up when your fellow co-workers are not doing what they are supposed to do. Thank you.
And before you go, you mentioned some bad apples, but it also does seem like some of the times we've talked, some of these are training tactics, right, that they have. So are you hopeful that at some point there could be some re-envisioning of what it looks like to police and what the tactics and the strategies are?
Definitely, I would like to see a whole different vamp of policing, because when you look at policing and when policing started, um, when you really look in the 60s and in the South and even in Alabama, it was oftentimes the police that was hitting the African American people with billy clubs, allowing their dogs to bite them, hosing us down with water hose. And so we really have to look at our policing system and work to revamp it, change how it was set up, because in reality, it wasn't set up for African American people. It was set up against African American people. And some of those same people are on the force today and are training their families to be on the force, um, with that same mindset of the Ku Klux Klan.
So, on that note, I have to ask you this too, because you talked about it a little bit. On January 6th, we saw a mob of people descend on the Capitol of the United States, and 5 people are dead as a result of it. And if you watch the video recap, it looks like this big group of people was met by 5 officers, and the officers were put into a really tough position. Think about that, the amount of police presence there compared to, gosh, I'm even thinking about the amount of police I saw on the streets when I was at Justice for Oscar rallies or any of the other ones, or the the massive police presence that we've seen at different protests that have been around people losing their lives to police violence or racial justice. Um, what do you make of the contrast?
Well, just look at that. I looked at it, and at first only like 50 people were arrested. Okay. In the protest, when they protest for my son, more than that was arrested. Um, People were sprayed with tear gas. They were uh, sprayed with pepper spray. Whatever the police used, they did that. Right. Um, and yeah, it was more people. And to me, you could even see officers letting them in. They wanted this. They, you know, incited, what took place basically. And I watched the media downplay the situation, very much so. Had it been African American people that did that, there would have been a lot more lives lost. There would have been a lot more arrests. Um, there would have it just been would have been totally different. And so I see just from that our judicial system still is not balanced. Lady Liberty is still not balanced, and we have a long way to go so that others can get justice for all, not just for some.
And on that note, because I can't separate that this is Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. His quote, "Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere." I don't know. What do you want people to really be thinking about this particular weekend of this particular year?
Think about what Martin Luther King fought for. And we only see a watered down version of his fighting. If we really study and look at the history books and really study, we will know that um, he fought for civil rights. And as he was fighting for civil rights, he didn't give up. He continued that fight until his life was taken from him. And he had been arrested so many times because of him fighting for civil rights. And I want us to really be willing to lay down our lives to ensure that all people are treated equally. And that's what he done, and that's what we should set a goal for ourselves to do as well, to fight for equal rights for all.
That's a perfect note to end on, and I'm hoping that you get some good news on Monday. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you.